folks, this is Rainiac, and this is week 7/8, depending on who you believe, of the Let's Play Olympics 2, the source.net Let's Play Olympics 2, I should say, the confusing return to numbers. And this week's game is an all-time classic. It's Actraiser for the Super Nintendo, released in 1991, and this week we're playing through in professional mode. But that's not all, because I also get to break the golden cardinal sin of LPing and let a save state on camera. Now, before you all think I've taken leave of my senses, I really haven't. It's part of the challenge for this week. In an effort to make sure that we don't all just produce videos of the same two stages 9 or 10 times over, the powers that be, Decoy Octopus and Fat Kakashi, have decided that you can start the video from anywhere in the game. As you can see, I've chosen the second world at Bloodpool. An interesting level with some rather interesting enemies, but who am I kidding? I picked it because it's easier than all the other levels in the game apart from Fillmore. Now, you probably have all heard of Actraiser, or most of you that are watching this probably heard of Actraiser, but you may not have played it. So you may not know what professional mode entails. Basically, professional mode becomes available to you once you've beaten the game. And all it does is it takes out the simulation levels, you know, the SimCity-esque sections in between action stages. It takes them out altogether. But there's a couple of extra twists to it, because you take double damage, while your enemies, such as this flying dragon thing, take more hits to kill. So normally the flying dragons coming out of the purple swamp here, they would take 1 hit to kill in the main game. Here, they take 2. You also take double damage. And in the further twist, there's no magic available to you. All you have is your trusty sword. And the items you can collect are limited to 1-ups, you see there, health refills in the form of half and full apples, and also a screen-clearing angel's wings. Now, Bloodpool Act 1's quite a short level because we're already coming up to the boss. And our first boss, as you can see, is this Manticore. Now, the Manticore is quite a simple boss. It just jumps around the platforms here, shooting fireballs. And by the way, a Manticore is kind of a Persian equivalent in their mythology to the Egyptian Sphinx. It's got the head of a human, and the body of a lion, and the wings of, I believe, a dragon, but don't quote me on that. It's got wings, as you can see. As I say, really simple boss. The trick here is to just lock the Manticore into the pattern you see on the screen in front of you right now. And if you do that, then there is no real reason why he should hit you. The other thing you've got to be careful is you've got to keep your distance, because if you get too close to him when he's jumping around, he can hit you. And the challenges this week all revolve around the bosses. One of them is to kill a boss without taking any damage, which is easier said than done, believe me. And the other one is, inspired by Fat Kakashi, once you kill a boss, you have to teabag it mercilessly in the face. Well, not in the face, just humping it will do. That's Bloodpool Act 1 done, taking no damage at all, and 2 bonus points into the bargain. Not too shabby for a first-time player of Actraiser. Yeah, I'm afraid I hadn't played this game before. I know that's stupid because this is a great game, but up until this week, I was yet to sample its delights. I can't play every game in the world, guys. Come on, give me some slack here. But from what I've played through, it's a really good game. It really is a classic for the Super Nintendo. However, as good as the game is, it doesn't have the fact that it's hard. Really hard. Seriously, its difficulty is very well known throughout gaming circles. Now, I've touched on the challenges for this, the achievements for this week, but the anti-points are the real problem here, or one in particular. The first one's not too bad. If you load a state over at the beginning to set up your video, or rewind at any time, you lose a point for each time you do it. But we're all, I'd like to think, semi-competent, at least, LPers in this contest. And we know that, you know, save stating on camera equals... Not equals, what am I? Leech speak? No. You don't do it, okay, guys? And I know I'm being a huge hypocrite here because I have done this in the past with my older videos, but that was the past. That's the point. I do like the Super Metro style ambient lighting in that little room. Sadly, it doesn't get used for anything other than that little section, so it's kind of a waste. But hey, it's a nice visual touch, I guess. As I say, I sound like kind of a hypocrite because I have save-stated on camera and loaded state in the past, but without trying to sound like a walking cliche here, that was then. This is now. I am not the LPer I was when I first started. And that's all I'm going to touch on that matter. The second one, as I'm saying, is absolutely fiendish. You have to collect every single item in the level. And I don't just mean that if you see an item, you collect it. I mean you have to actually go out and actively seek every item and collect it. Failure to do this will result in losing a point, and you know how anal I get about achievement points, and in particular not getting any negative points. So unfortunately I had to go out from my way and get every single item, which made what would have been a tricky task even harder. Take for example that angel wings power up over to the left with that skeleton guy. My first few takes through this game, I didn't even know that was there, so if I had actually gone with those takes, then I would have lost the point. Fortunately for me, as it turned out, all those takes I couldn't use because various things happened. So there you are. Also, do not get carried into those spikes at the top there because they are insta-kill. So now we're on what appears to be a castle roof with the dumbest enemies in the entire game, these flying guys. For whatever reason, it's like the best way to kill the master, because that's your playable character by the way, is to fly down next to him where they could easily be murdered. Rather than, I don't know, flying on top of him where he couldn't see them and then dropping directly onto his head. No, apparently when they were dishing out brains, those imps were right at the back of the queue. These skeleton guys, I really don't like them. They're kind of tricky enemies. I mean, this guy, fortunately, you can just kill him from below. And that's a tip, by the way. Anytime you see an enemy above you and you're like on the platform below it, use that as an exploit to kill it without it really causing you any problems. Now these disappearing platforms, well, not disappearing, these platforms that move in and out of the wall, they look quite tricky, but once you've been through it a few times, it's very easy to get the pattern down, and they shouldn't give you too many problems. And now just the final gauntlet of a few enemies to run here before the boss. The trick with the skeleton guys is to jump when they extend their hands, and then hit them twice to kill them. Once those guys are out of the way, however, it's time to go for this doorway to fight our second boss, which is a sorcerer. Now the sorcerer has two attacks. He will fire skulls out of his hand, and he can also attack with lightning. But much like the Manticore, who was technically a sub-boss, this is actually the boss of Blood Pool. He's not that difficult, in fact he's very easy once you get his pattern down. The trick is to, and when he teleports onto the ground like that, you won't actually be able to get a hit on him. He'll teleport away before you can even do any damage to him. The trick is to try to get to spawn in either of these platforms in the bottom corners here. Like here, for example, because you can then get into a place where you can get 3 or 4 good hits in and do some real damage. Now once you get him down to half his health or less, he will transform into a werewolf for whatever reason, and this guy can be tricky if you let him be. I decided to just tank him, and then in the words of the Red Hot Chili Peppers song, hump the bump on his corpse, and that's Blood Pool over and out. As I say, he can be a tricky boss, but once you've learned this pattern, he's not too bad. Now we're in perhaps my favourite name for a world, Cassandra, or if I was going to pronounce it phonetically, Cassandra. I think Cassandra sounds cooler myself. It's a desert world which is supposedly based on ancient Egypt. The reason why a lot of people believe this will become clear when we get to Act 2. That's the kind of a clever, cool thing about Actraiser. A lot of the areas, apart from Defheim, which is just a boss rush gauntlet, appears to be based on real-life countries in the world. For example, this is ancient Egypt. Fillmore, the first world, appears to be based on ancient Greece because you're fighting a centaur and a minotaur as its bosses. Blood Pool that we're just in appears to be based on Europe. The main reason for that is the werewolf boss, because for some reason I always associate werewolves with Germany. Don't ask me why. And there are other parts of the game like Itos, which is after Cassandra, is based on Japan. It's just a neat little touch. By the way, that flame guy, the angry sun has nothing on him. He is really annoying. I have no idea why I just referred to a floating anthropomorphic flame as a guy, but let's just run with it. So far, Cassandra has been fairly tame, but that's about to change as soon as you go through this door. The flying guys return, but they could actually be a bit of a danger here. On a couple of takes prior to the one I went for, this one, I had been hit by those guys, and they sent me flying off to my doom in the pit below. We also have a new enemy in these bugmen. I think they're meant to be either bees or wasps. They're some sort of insect turned into sort of a humanoid form anyway. I am so great at explaining myself when I'm when I'm doing comments like this, aren't I? Just slurring my words all over the goddamn place. But this is a really tricky section. It kind of reminds me of the biblical Tower of Babel. The story behind that, by the way, if you don't know about it, is that they were trying to build a tower up to the heavens, and God decided to stop them by giving them all a different language so they couldn't understand each other. It kind of gives me a a feeling of that story for whatever reason, don't ask me why. And here, really finish the hidden item, it's a 1-up, you have to drop off that side of the platform to get it. If you try a long jump from here, then you probably won't make it. Also, it's kind of hard to get from the platform where the 1-up is, and make that jump more than a few times, far more than I care to admit to. I failed that jump and went flying to my death in the pit below. As you can see, quite a tricky section, not made any easier of course by the fact that I can't miss out any items, such as this full apple here. I'm actually quite relieved to have got that apple. And of course the flying guy decided to rob me of my full health immediately. We also have these plants that stick up from the ground, and the imps can now throw spears. And you can actually kill the fire. Or fires, I should say. There's more than one of them. A full health here, which means we're coming up to another boss. Well, technically it's a mini-boss. Both this ant lion... Yes, we're back to fighting ant lions in the desert. You just thought it was Alex Kidd, this contest. No, it's not. And the manticore were technically mini-bosses. He's not too difficult, just jump over his tentacles and then just tank him. He fires rocks into the air, but he really isn't that difficult, providing you just tank him. And once again, teabagging his corpse. I don't know why I've continued to do that, because I've got the achievement for that already. I think Frank Kakashi just got me in the mood, goddammit. And as we enter Act 2 of Cassandra, you can see why a lot of people think it's supposed to be ancient Egypt, because suddenly we're in a temple. It's kind of a strange jump in professional mode, that we go straight from the desert to a pyramid/temple. Of course, in simulation mode, all these little jumps are explained in the course of the storyline. But professional mode just throws you into one action stage after another, and there is no exposition to speak of. In other words, it's Quantum of Solace, the video game. And yes, I went there. So let's talk a little bit about the story of Actraiser then, because we're actually coming towards the end of the video. There's only like, what, 3 or 4 minutes left. You're playing as the Master. Well, technically, actually, you're playing as a embodiment of the Master in the form of a statue, which you see energized at the start of the game, or you would if you started from Fillmore anyway. The Master's great enemy is the demon Tanzra, which is basically another way of saying Satan. Basically, the Master/God and Tanzra/the Devil had a great battle, and Tanzra actually won. Hundreds of years later, the Master is weakened due to lack of belief in him, and so he has to go around the world basically restoring their faith in him. And at the end of the game, you fight a boss rush in Defheim, and then you defeat Tanzra, and that's the end of the game. Now, I really wanted to be that guy who, for his video, went to Defheim, defeated all the bosses like a champion. Fortunately, as I say, this was the first week I'd ever played Actraiser, and I just couldn't be that guy, okay? I am not Rort. I'm not even Eho. Now, Actraiser is actually part of a 5-game series, which has been dubbed the Quintology, I think, because Quintet were the developers for all 5 games. We have Actraiser, its direct sequel Actraiser 2, a spin-off where you also play as the Master, Soul Blazer. Then we have RPGs Terranigma and Illusion of Gaia. Now, all 5 of these games, with the exception of Actraiser 2, are highly regarded. They're all for the Super Nintendo as well. Actraiser 2, sadly, wasn't a patch on this game. I'm not calling it terrible, but it had a lot to live up to, and I think in the eyes of most games anyway, it kind of failed. Another thing I have to mention that I really like about this game, because it really is a great game. I know I've said this throughout the course of the video, but I'm trying to drill this into you. This is a really good game, despite the fact that I appear to be suffering badly at the hands of Cassandra Act 2. That's just because at this point I was getting a bit sloppy and rushing through to get to a certain point before my 15 minutes were up. Another thing I have to mention is the music. The composer of this game is none other than Yuzo Koshiro, and his music really helps to elevate this game from pretty good to classic. I think the theme for Bloodpool and also Cassandra Act 1 is probably my favourite, but there's a lot of good music in the game. Some of it reminds me of Castlevania, and that's not a bad thing. These Horus warriors, you want to try and jump back to avoid their sword slashes, and this guy basically acts as a way of taking off some health before you fight the boss. Now, the boss of Cassandra is a weird choice. It's actually it's the floating death mask of the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun. Why this is the boss, God knows, although I suppose it does fit the Egyptian theme of Cassandra, and gives further credence to the theory that this is meant to be ancient Egypt. he's not that tough a boss. He comes down from the ceiling trying to crush you. He'll fire these strange projectiles that actually transform into mini Tutankhamun masks that shoot arrows at you, but the arrows can be destroyed. And I can actually kill this guy without taking any damage, but I was getting sloppy most of the point. I was watching the clock at this point, so I just decided to tank him. That's the end of Cassandra Act 2, and that's the end indeed of Actraiser. So join me next time for the final week 8/9, where we play God Only Knows. Until then, TTFN.